This video should be considered a companion piece to my previous one. Cyberpunk 2077 was a mistake. So if you haven't seen that one yet, you should go back and watch it before returning to this one. I promise what I'm about to say will make much more sense if you do. I don't normally make these types of follow-up videos, but I had a lot of thoughts regarding the character building of Cyberpunk 2077, how the game presents player agency, and the way in which it treats its underlying themes. While I could have discussed the topic of this video in my previous one, I feel it would have been too out of place, and would prefer to make a separate video for those interested, rather than shoehorning it in where it doesn't necessarily belong. So with that being said, what exactly is the topic of this video? I want to break down my aforementioned thoughts on Cyberpunk 2077 and compare it to a different game in the cyberpunk genre, one which I feel succeeds where CD Projekt Red failed, and that game is the Red Strings Club. As discussed in my previous video, Cyberpunk 2077 struggles to effectively develop and build up characters throughout the game, in large part due to the way main and side missions are structured. While characters may feel and act one way during main missions, they can almost instantly switch to the polar opposite, which in turn breaks the immersion for the player. With that being said, there are numerous moments in which the action is toned down, sitting you directly across from another character, placing the emphasis in that moment specifically on V's relationship with whoever you're speaking to. This narrowed focus, zooming in on the story until we are no longer looking at the citywide battle against an evil corporation, but rather an isolated conversation between two people, is the kind of personal storytelling I wanted from Cyberpunk 2077. Unfortunately, these moments are few and far between. The Red Strings Club, however, doesn't suffer from this problem, as it offers a singular, narrative-driven experience wherein players can fully immerse themselves in this story and world, and only have the illusion broken when credits start to roll. Because there are no side missions to worry about, all of your time in the game is focused on learning about the characters and progressing the story further. While those conversation sequences of gameplay are limited in Cyberpunk, they are one of the main cruxes of the experience in the Red Strings Club. You play as Donovan, a bartender, and the overwhelming majority of the game is spent mixing drinks for your clients. These drinks can be mixed in a multitude of ways, each one having a specific feeling or emotion attached, which is then passed on to the person drinking it. By creating drinks with certain emotions, you're able to influence the direction of the many conversations you have with the people in your bar. In either case, Cyberpunk 2077 or the Red Strings Club, you are sat down directly across from another character, simply having a conversation. However, this is one of the few game mechanics in the Red Strings Club, meaning players will spend much more time talking with characters, watching their relationships evolve at a more natural pace, and seeing them become better developed than what's on display in Cyberpunk 2077. These conversation segments of gameplay also directly tie into my next point regarding how each game handles player agency. Cyberpunk 2077 was, for the most part, advertised as CD Projekt Red's next big RPG, with all that the moniker entails, including a choice system that would influence the game's story and ending. What was delivered, however, fits the loosest definition of that possible. Yes, there are choices to make, but almost none of them matter to the overall plot, only serving to influence the immediate scene the player is in. Offering players the illusion of choice wouldn't be the worst offense possible, so long as the game is honest about it. In the Red Strings Club, there is essentially one choice in the game that matters, and you don't even get to see the outcome of your decision. At any point, the player can pause the game to see a web of red strings connecting all of the different choices you can make throughout the story. However, if you scroll all the way to the other side of this web, you see that there is only one ending, no matter what way you combine the prior decisions. That one ending is also the first thing players see when starting up the Red Strings Club: Brandeis falling to his death. The game never shies away from the fact that none of its choices really matter, and even uses that fact to great effect, as much of the story centers around the illusion of choice. So what was the one choice that does actually matter? As Brandeis falls to his death, you have to decide whether to tell Donovan the truth about what happened in the tower before he fell, that their mission was completely pointless, or to tell Donovan that he loves him. There's no timer on the screen, and the player can wait here as long as they want, watching Brandeis fall even further. Whatever you decide, the game ends with Brandeis falling off screen, and the player is left looking at the reflection of the city on the rain-soaked windows of a skyscraper. Both Cyberpunk 2077 and the Red Strings Club are nearly devoid of all player agency when it comes to having many choices add together for a unique ending. But at least the Red Strings Club is upfront in providing that information and uses its limitations to its advantage. In discussing the themes of both Cyberpunk 2077 and the Red Strings Club, I want to focus on one specific scene from each game. First, let's establish the setting and goal of these scenes. The player is at the skyscraper of a megacorporation, and the intent of the scene is to display how immensely powerful, oppressive, and evil said corporation is. Which game was I just describing? Cyberpunk 2077 or the Red Strings Club? Surprisingly, both. In Cyberpunk 2077, the scene I'm referring to is when Johnny Silverhand attacks Arasaka HQ with Rogue, dropping the bomb down the elevator shaft, followed by him being captured by Atom Smasher. Here, the intent of the scene is achieved through over-the-top action, throwing subtlety out the window and putting it right in the player's face that Johnny hates Arasaka and they must be really evil and oppressive if he's willing to launch an attack on them like this. Now compare that scene to the one from the Red Strings Club. Brandeis has broken into the office of Supercontinent, intent on stopping them from controlling people through their implants by way of a program called Social Psych Welfare, or SPW. Brandeis is eventually shot by security, causing him to fall through a window, sending him from the top of the skyscraper to the ground below. He never went into the building planning to cause chaos or attack them outright. The game never needs to drop a bomb to get the point across. As previously mentioned, this brings players full circle, right back to where the game started. However, what I want to focus on here is the fall itself. As Brandeis is falling, he has the time to hold entire conversations with people. In fact, he falls for several minutes before reaching the ground. If you look at the reflection of the city as he falls, you can see that there isn't a single building on the entire skyline that matches the height of Supercontinent's skyscraper. This corporation, this staggeringly large monument to their power, eclipses absolutely everything in sight. Where Cyberpunk 2077 achieves the intent of its scene through action, violence, and anger, the Red Strings Club only needs to show you just how immeasurably tall one tower is. Despite sharing many elements between these two scenes, the Red Strings Club is able to use these same ingredients to much better effect than Cyberpunk does. Subtlety is, in fact, key. If you take anything away from this video, please don't let it be that I think Cyberpunk 2077 should have been a 2D pixel art game that has almost no traditional gameplay elements, because that's not true. My point in making this is to further break down how I feel about Cyberpunk 2077's story shortcomings, and to look at how the Red Strings Club was able to create a much more engaging narrative while using the same setting and themes, and to do so on a shoestring of a budget and team when compared to what Cyberpunk was working with. In the grand scheme of things, these are both incredibly different titles, each with their own merit as well as their own pitfalls. But in terms of character building, player agency, and the subtlety in how the themes are approached, I truly believe the Red Strings Club is what Cyberpunk 2077 should have been.